Hey there, I'm Stephanie Stiavetti from fearlessfresh.com, and today we're going to talk about how to roast the perfect turkey. Probably for Thanksgiving, but any time of year as well. So first of all, I just wrote like a 9-page document on how to roast the perfect turkey. You'll find a link to it somewhere on this page. So I want you to download that link because it's got everything in there that you need to know about how to roast a turkey. So here's the first thing I want you to know about roasting a turkey. Roasting a turkey is no different than roasting a chicken. It's just bigger, right? And so nothing really changes besides timing when it comes to the difference between roasting a chicken and roasting a turkey. So if you can roast a chicken, you can roast a turkey just fine. If you've never roasted a chicken, well, roasting a chicken is super easy, and so is roasting a turkey. So take heart if you've never roasted a turkey before, and this is your first turkey, because I got your back, and we're going to show you exactly how to do it. So wherever it is on this page, download that document, get all of the information that I'm going to talk about here and more in one place, and you can read it, you can reference it, and it'll just make your life so much easier. So first things first, let's talk about turkey selection. So if you have not yet bought your turkey, I want you to take a close look at the turkey you're going to buy and make sure it's not injected with anything, because commercial turkeys tend to be injected with all sorts of stuff like salt and sugar and caramel coloring and other food dyes. And it kind of depends, right? Because what commercial companies are trying to do is they're trying to make the turkey more flavorful. They're also trying to add water weight, because when you buy or sell turkeys by the pound, the heavier it is, the more you can charge people for it. So if you can, buy a turkey that doesn't have anything injected in it, no flavors, no salt, no sugar. And you'll know this because if you look at the label on the turkey, it will say just turkey in the ingredients list, right? If it's not been injected with anything. Now, if you look at the ingredients list and it says salt or sugar or caramel coloring, food dye, you'll know that that turkey has preservatives in it, and you probably want to avoid it. You also notice if you look at the nutritional information, it'll say it'll have a sodium count or a higher carb count. It'll have other stuff on there, but if you can, try to buy a turkey that doesn't have anything in it. Now, if you already have a turkey, like somebody gave you a turkey or you bought it earlier, it's already got the stuff in it, don't worry about it. It's fine. It'll taste great. It'll be perfect. But one thing I want to mention is that if you have a turkey that's already got salt injected into it, do not brine it, right? Because this turkey is already salted. If you were to dry brine or wet brine a turkey that's already got salt and sugar in it, the turkey would be way too salty and it would not taste very good. Now, I have to say this because I'm an animal rights advocate. If you can buy a turkey that is free range or sustainably grown, that is the best. Like, if in a perfect world, we would all have like these organic, like free range turkeys that lived a really happy life until the day the axe falls. Unfortunately, those turkeys are really, really expensive. And so not all of us can afford them. So if you can't afford like a really fancy, like free range, sustainably farmed turkey, it's fine. I totally get it. Like, just cook whatever turkey you've got and it's all good. But just if you have the means to buy a turkey that, you know, lived a good life until its final days, you should take the opportunity to do so. They taste really good, and also being able to support, you know, animal rights and agriculture is always a good use for your dollar. Now let's talk about what to do if your turkey is frozen, because I can't tell you how many times I have talked to people and they're like, I made a turkey and it was cooked on the outside and it was beautiful, and then we cut into it and it's still frozen in the middle. And this happens a lot. It happens like a lot, like way more than you would think. And it happens actually even to people that have been cooking turkeys for decades. Every once in a while I talk to somebody and they're like, oh, I've been making turkeys for 20 years and suddenly I had one that was frozen in the middle. Oh, shucks. Anyways, the reason for this is that turkeys take days and days and days to defrost. And the bigger the turkey is, the more time it needs to defrost. That's totally normal. It's just the way of turkeys. Now, here's the deal. You do not want to take your turkey out of the fridge and leave it at room temperature to thaw out, because turkeys are big and they would need like 6 to 8 hours to thaw out completely. And even then they might not be completely defrosted. But you cannot leave poultry at room temperature for that long, because it becomes a total food sanitation nightmare, right? So when you have poultry, salmonella becomes a problem. Other bacteria become a problem. Like, you do not want to have your meat, any meat, let alone poultry, sitting at room temperature for hours and hours and hours. So I always recommend defrosting your turkey in the refrigerator. And there's a whole schedule to this, but basically, if your turkey is under 10 pounds, it's probably going to need 3 days to defrost. If your turkey is like 12, 15, even 20 pounds, it could need up to 5 days to defrost. And basically, it's super simple. All you do is you take it out of the freezer and you put it in your refrigerator a couple days ahead of time. Now, if you download the document on this page, you will see that I've included a schedule that tells you exactly when to pull your turkey out of the freezer, depending on what size it is. And in that chart also includes like at what point you would need to brine it, but we'll talk about that in a second. So when you pull your turkey out of the refrigerator or out of the freezer and put it in your refrigerator, One thing to keep in mind is you want to put it in like a bowl or a roasting pan or a container of some sort so that it doesn't drip and leak like turkey juices all over your stuff in the fridge, because raw turkey juices are bad, right? They're like laden with bacteria. Like, it's raw meat juice, right? You do not want that on your on your milk or on your ketchup. You want to make sure that you keep everything else in your refrigerator safe, and you do that by putting your turkey in a receptacle that is large enough to hold it. You also want to put your turkey on the bottom of your fridge, and there's a few reasons for this. One of them being that if your turkey does drip, beyond your best intentions, like, at least if it drips, it just drips onto the flat area onto the bottom of your fridge. It doesn't drip on any of your food. Putting your turkey and any drippy meats on the bottom of your fridge is really important. It's also really important because a couple months ago, I was at somebody's house and they were actually defrosting a turkey, an extra turkey they had from last year. And we heard this huge crash, and we ran over to the fridge because that's where we heard that the crash came from. And she had put the turkey on the top shelf of her fridge with the milk and a couple other things, and the shelf for her fridge broke and it fell. So the turkey fell, the milk fell, there was turkey everywhere, turkey juice everywhere, there was milk everywhere. Like, everything in her fridge was covered. It was just a huge mess. So refrigerator shelves are not really meant to hold the weight of like a 15 to 20 pound turkey on top of the other stuff you've put on the shelf. So putting your turkey on the bottom of your fridge, where it's not on a shelf, but actually on like the hard plastic bottom, will make sure you don't break any shelves. So just to reiterate, you need to take your turkey out with ample time to defrost. Otherwise, you run the chances of the middle of your turkey still being frozen after you cook it. And that's a super bummer. So if you have a huge gargantuan turkey, like 15, 20 pounds, you're going to have to pull that baby out of the freezer probably Thursday or Friday, even though Thanksgiving isn't until the following Thursday. Now, you got to keep in mind that the turkey is going to remain frozen for a good chunk of that time, right? So it's not like it's really going to be sitting at room temperature or sitting at refrigerator temperatures for a week, because that turkey is going to take a long time to defrost. It probably won't actually come to refrigerator temperature all the way through until Monday or Tuesday, at the very earliest, if it's a huge turkey. If it's a normal sized turkey, like 8 to 10 pounds, like, you can probably pull it out Saturday or Sunday. Monday, if you really haven't forgot about it, and if you're pulling it out Monday, you're gonna struggle a little bit to brine it. It might work if it's a smaller turkey, and we'll go into why that is later. But just remember, you need to pull your turkey out with ample time. Again, download the document I've attached to this video, and it will give you the schedule for when to defrost your turkey. Okay, let's talk about brining. Every year, people get all up in arms about brining. Like, there's camp wet drying, brine, and then there's camp dry brine. Now, the difference between wet brining and dry brining is pretty huge, right? Like, they yield very similar results. So in the end, like, the turkey is going to taste about the same regardless of which method you use. The dry brining method is really easy. You just rub your turkey down, your dry turkey down, with salt and sugar and herbs and spices and anything else that you want to flavor it with. And then you put it in the fridge and it's done. It's super easy. Now, if you wet brine, you've got kind of an ordeal on your hands. So first of all, if you wet brine, you've got to boil a huge pot of water. Actually, first you've got to find a pot that's big enough to hold your whole turkey. And if you've got like a 15 to 20 pound turkey, that's going to be kind of tough. And then your pot needs to be big enough to not only hold the turkey, but all the water to keep it submerged. And then you're going to bring that pot of water to boil with your herbs and spices and flavorings. And then you need to cool it. And then you're going to submerge that turkey. And then the turkey needs to remain submerged. And people get very creative about this, right? And it involves like a brick wrapped in a Ziploc bag to try and hold the turkey down, using a brining bag. So you put the turkey in the bag with all the liquid and you squeeze all the air out of the bag and you tie it to get rid of all the air bubbles. So there's like no air whatsoever. And still at some point, you're probably gonna have to flip that turkey over in the brine to make sure that it gets completely brined evenly. And it's a huge ordeal. And then on top of everything else, you need to refrigerate your turkey for the entire time you're brining it, because if you're brining it, that is not preserving your turkey. It cannot sit at room temperature. So you also have to fit this enormous pot with this big turkey in the fridge, along with all the rest of your Thanksgiving food. And you got to make sure that it's on the bottom of your fridge, because I guarantee you that the shelf in your fridge is not going to hold a huge pot of water containing a 10 to 20 pound turkey. So if I have not made you a fan of dry brining by now, then hey, more power to you, go for the wet brining method. But I really prefer dry brining because it's so much easier. Now, when it comes to dry brining, it's super simple. Like the dry brining mixture is basically salt, sugar, herbs, and spices, maybe a little bit of black pepper. That's it. Now, I prefer kosher salt for a couple reasons. One, iodized salt can be a little too salty. It can be really like kind of like harshly salty, whereas kosher salt has a more normal salt level. It's like a pleasant saltiness. It's not overbearing, it's not chemically, it's not like intense unless you use too much of it, right? I actually prefer kosher salt for cooking in general, and you can get it for super cheap at the grocery store, at Safeway, at Fred Meyer, at Kroger, Piggly Wiggly, whatever you happen to have in your area. Like, you can get a good sized box of kosher salt for like $2, right? And it'll last you a long time. And in fact, you might even decide that you prefer to use it in all of your general cooking, like I highly recommend, because kosher salt is just great. So you can also add sugar, right? Sugar is also a natural preservative. You can add brown sugar for flavor, or you can just add regular white sugar. You can add herbs. I like using fresh herbs. You have to chop them really fine, but you can also use dry herbs. And actually, this is a really handy way to use up all the like kind of dry herbs that are hanging out in your spice cabinet that you know, they've been there for a couple years, you never use them. Like if you have oregano or Italian spices, some thyme, rosemary, whatnot. Like as long as they're like in relatively fine chopped form, you can also put them in a little tiny food processor and zip them to a powder. Like they should be fine. So if you've got old herbs kind of like hanging out, like not old, like 5 years old, 10 years old, not herbs from the 80s like my grandma had when she died, but like reasonably old herbs. Within the past like 2, 3, maybe 4 years. Like this is a great way to use them up without wasting them. You can also add spices to your brine mixture, which is a great way to use up spices. The thing about spices is you need to not add too many because they can overpower your turkey. You also need to make sure that the spices you use are actually going with the flavor profile of your dish overall, or of your dinner overall, right? So spices are really nice. They give the turkey like kind of a scented, seasony flavor without going overboard. Personal spices that I personally like are smoked paprika. I like ground star anise, maybe a little bit of cumin. They give a turkey a little bit of like oomph and perk. I like it a lot, but you want to make sure you don't go overboard because they can totally railroad the flavor of your turkey. So once you've got all your ingredients together, you just throw them in a bowl, mix them together, get your fingers in there, kind of rub the herbs and spices up against the salt, like with your fingers, and make sure they're all like really like mixed in there. And then you let it sit for 20-30 minutes, allow the flavors to meld. And then it's really easy. You just cover your whole turkey with the mixture, right? You get the inside of it, get the outside of it, all the nooks and crannies, its little armpits, underneath its little legs, you get everywhere. You want to make sure you cover every last inch of turkey inside and out with brine, with the brining mixture. And then you put it in a bowl, you cover it, and you throw it in the fridge. Now, a lot of people like to leave their turkey uncovered because it does dry out the skin of the turkey. It makes for really crispy skin. But I also don't like having an uncovered turkey in my fridge for days because it's kind of a food safety nightmare. Like other foods can fall into the turkey, like turkey juices can splash out. So I prefer to cover my turkey for the entire brining period and then uncover it the night before Thanksgiving, just to let the skin dry out just overnight, and that'll give you nice crispy skin. Now, a few important things you need to know about brining. First of all, when you are done brining your turkey, so about an hour before it's about to go in the oven, you need to rinse the turkey off, especially if you're doing a dry brine, right? Because your turkey is covered with salt, like covered with salt, with a layer of salt. If you were to throw that turkey right in the oven, it would be way too salty, like no bueno salty, right? So you need to give the turkey a good rinse inside and out. Don't forget to rinse the inside. And then you set it aside to come to room temperature to cook. Now, here's a really important thing about rinsing turkey. When you rinse off a turkey, you get bacteria all over the kitchen because wherever the water splatters, any bacteria that was on the surface of your turkey splatters too. So after you're done rinsing your turkey, I implore you, please disinfect your entire sink area. That includes the sink, the inside the sink, the tap, the counter around it, the backsplash, the shelf, everything that is nearby. It's really important because you want to make sure you don't scatter any bacteria that was on the turkey to like utensils or foods that won't be cooked. It's just really important to keep your family safe. Now, here's a really important thing about brining is your turkey needs to be at least 50% thawed out before you can brine it, right? You cannot brine a frozen turkey. Well, you can brine a frozen turkey in a wet brine because the liquid will help defrost the turkey somewhat. But if you were to try and dry brine a frozen turkey, like the salt wouldn't go anywhere. Like it just would sit on the surface until it very slowly defrosted. And so you want to defrost your turkey at least halfway before you brine it. Now, this can get a little tricky for some people. They get overwhelmed by the schedule. Like, well, if I needed to brine my turkey like 3 to 4 days ahead of time, but then the turkey needs like 3 or 4 days to defrost, that means I need to pull my turkey out like a week ahead of time, which is true. Now, here's the deal, right? If you have a huge, ginormous turkey, like you need to pull it out like a week before Thanksgiving so it defrosts completely and allows it to defrost 50% of the time, 50% of the way, so that you have like 3 or 4 days to brine it before you cook it on Thursday. Now that means taking your turkey out of the freezer and putting it in the fridge like literally Friday or Saturday before Thanksgiving. Now this may seem a little dicey to some people, and I get it, right? But here's the deal. When you pull your turkey out of the freezer and put it in the fridge, it does not go to refrigerator temperatures immediately. Like it'll stay at like relatively frozen temperatures for a couple days. So it won't actually be like frozen temperature, refrigerator temperature, so that it gets weird from sitting in the fridge for too long. It'll actually be fine. Plus, when you brine it, the salt and the sugar in the brine will help preserve the turkey and make it last a little bit longer. If you've got a smaller turkey, like 7 pounds, 8 pounds, 9 pounds, even 10 pounds. Like you don't need to pull it out the Friday or Saturday before, but you do still need to pull it out like Sunday, Monday at the latest. So if you pull it out Sunday or Monday, you let it sit in the fridge for 2 days and then you brine it like 2 or 3 days before Thanksgiving. Now, if this sounds overwhelming to you, don't worry, totally got your back. Again, find that document that I've linked on this page. I've got a schedule in there that will tell you exactly when to pull your turkey out of the freezer and exactly when to start brining it. And I've broken it down by turkey size so you can make it work for whatever your situation is. Seriously, download that document, and that way you don't have to deal with like figuring out the days and the timing and the math. You'll have it right there for you. So another question that I get repeatedly every year is, how do I prevent my turkey breast from drying out while also making sure the dark meat is completely cooked? Now here's the deal between the white meat and the dark meat on a turkey. The white meat dries out really easily because it is chemically and biologically different than the dark meat. The dark meat can actually be cooked to about 175 without drying out, whereas the white meat, if you take it much over 160, you have kind of like sawdust, basically turkey flavored sawdust, which is not great. And the problem too is that people always cook their turkey's breast up, which means the breast cooks a lot faster than the thighs, which actually take longer to cook anyway. They take even longer to cook when they're on the bottom because they're protected by the pan, whereas the breast has no protection because it's just out there in the ambient heat. So you've got a couple different options to make sure that your turkey breast is nice and juicy while also cooking your thighs and legs to the perfect temperature. One of them is to take your turkey apart before you cook it, right? You just cut off the breast, cut off the thighs, cook them separately, and it's done. And you can actually brine the individual bits of turkey. Like you don't have to brine a whole turkey. You can take your turkey apart and brine the individual pieces. You can also brine just a turkey breast roast. You can brine just turkey legs. You can brine anything, right? So taking your turkey apart before you cook it is probably the best way to cook a turkey to make sure everything is cooked perfectly. Now this tends to be an unpopular option because people want the presentation of this whole big beautiful bird taken out of the oven at once, right? And I get it, but the reality is if you are really attached to that whole bird presentation, you're going to struggle to make sure everything's cooked at the same time. One way around this that I have found, and it works really well for chickens, is you start with the breast down and the thighs up. Now the reason the breast cooks faster is because it's exposed to ambient heat and then the bottom is protected by the pan, right? So if you flip the bird over and you start the thighs first cooking on top, what happens is those thighs are exposed to ambient heat. They get a head start on cooking, and then halfway through cooking, you flip it over and the breast, which until that point has been protected by the pan itself, is now getting exposed to the more ambient heat that's floating around the oven. Therefore, they will generally cook faster and more evenly. Now, you run into an issue when you cook a turkey like this if it's over like 12 pounds, because flipping over like a 15 to 20 pound turkey when it's hot and greasy can be a real pain in the butt. So this may or may not work for you, but if you're roasting like a smaller turkey, 6 to 10 pounds, it'll work great. And it also, like I said, it also works great for chickens. Another method for making sure your turkey is cooked perfectly is to spatchcock it or butterfly it. Basically, you cut the turkey down the middle and then you splay it out flat so it takes up a lot of space horizontally. That means that the breast and the dark meat are all exposed to the same amount of ambient heat. And it's actually a really easy way to cook your turkey and make sure everything's done, assuming that you don't have an enormous turkey and that your oven can fit the entire thing, right? Because if you spatchcock a turkey, you have to lay it flat, and you want to lay it flat on a rack in a large baking sheet, and sometimes your oven won't accommodate that. But if your oven can accommodate that, that's actually a really good way to make sure your turkey is cooked completely perfectly. And if none of that works, there's always the good old-fashioned method of cooking the turkey until the breast is done, cutting the breast off, taking it out of the oven, and then putting the turkey back in the oven like the dark meat, so the dark meat and the legs can continue cooking. That's, I think, what most people do. It's just sort of the reality of it. But I mean, ultimately, you do not want to sacrifice the turkey breast just so you have a beautiful turkey coming out of the oven, right? Like if you want that whole turkey beautiful image coming out of the oven, it's kind of meaningless if the breast meat is really dried out. So I highly recommend like taking the turkey apart, spatchcocking it, or cutting off the breasts when they're done so that you have like a more consistently cooked turkey than really being stuck to that like whole turkey image that'll overcook your breast. Now, there's this whole school of thought that you need to bring your turkey fully to room temperature before you cook it. And I'm here to tell you that that's dangerous, right? People pull their turkey out of the fridge like 6 hours before they cook it. Seriously bad idea. Like I said earlier, turkey, all poultry are highly susceptible to salmonella contamination, among other things, and leaving it at room temperature for that long is a seriously bad idea. Your turkey only needs about 1 hour to come to room temperature. And it won't come fully to room temperature, absolutely. But the reality is that 1 hour at room temperature will take the edge off that cold and give it a head start when you put it in the oven so that the oven is not fighting against that cold refrigerator temperature. And that 1 hour gives you time to rinse off your turkey. You can rinse it in warmer water if you want, not hot water, because you'll start to cook the outside of your turkey. But rinse it all off, get all your brining solution off, and set it aside and just let it sit for 1 hour. Alrighty, now let's talk about what to do when you're about ready to put your turkey in the oven. Now, first of all, you need to preheat your oven for at least 30 minutes ahead of time. Now everybody's like, but my oven beeps after 15 minutes and it says it's at temperature, and it's lying. All ovens lie, right? Like, get a little $5 oven thermometer from Walmart or Target or Amazon or wherever, put it in your oven, and you will see that your oven thermostat is lying to you when it says that it's at temperature after 15 minutes. Like, ovens take bare minimum 30 minutes to heat up, and that's because the entire interior of the oven needs to heat up as well. And that includes like the walls and the door, everything needs to come to temperature to heat more effectively. So you want to heat minimum 30 minutes ahead of time, up to an hour. Now, I personally like to cook my turkey at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, there's a lot of people that would say, no, I like it at 375, I like it at 425, blah, 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 whatever. It's fine. Everybody has a method. And actually, if you have a method already that works for you and it turns out perfect turkey in your oven, then I totally encourage you to take advantage of it. My personal method that I have found to be flawless is to cook a turkey at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And the reason why this works is it's just the perfect temperature to cook things relatively slowly, but still give you the crispy outside skin. Now, another important fact about like cooking your turkey is you want to rotate it partway through cooking, right? So I like to rotate my turkey every like hour or so. Now, in your average kitchen, you'll only be able to rotate it like fully front to back because some home ovens are relatively small or you have an enormous turkey. But if you have the option to rotate your turkey like 90 degrees every hour, that is the best way to go about it. It will ensure that your turkey is cooked more evenly. Now, the reason for this is because your oven, along with every other oven on the planet, has hot spots and cold spots, right? Like the back is going to be warmer than the front, like one corner is going to be hotter than another corner. If you rotate your turkey fairly regularly, and I'm not talking like every 20, 30 minutes, because if you just keep opening the oven, you're going to have problems. It's not going to cook very efficiently, but like once an hour or so, rotate your turkey, you'll find that it cooks more evenly. Now, here's something you really need to be aware of. Do not try to put a bunch of random crap in your oven at once to cook all at the same time. Like, it's just a bad idea. So every item that you put in your oven will increase the cooking time of everything else in the oven. So there's a bunch of reasons for this. One of them being, like, for every cold or room temperature item you introduce to your oven, it reduces the overall oven temperature substantially, right? So if you've got like 5 things in there, even 2 or 3 things in there, it can substantially reduce or expand the amount of time it takes for everything to cook. So your turkey that would have normally taken like 3 hours will suddenly take like 4 or 5 hours to cook. And then it's like 7 p.m. and you're like, what the hell? Why am I still cooking for Thanksgiving? Dinner was supposed to be like 3 hours ago. The other reason why this is a problem is that everything that you put in your oven becomes an obstacle for heat convection, right? So heat moves around your oven in air currents and heat currents, right? And there's like the whole science of like heat convection. But suffice it to say that everything you put in there causes a blockage of heat movement, right? Especially if we're talking like roasting pans or sheet pans or big pots, anything that takes up a lot of space. And flat items particularly act like a wall to heat. So heat needs to move freely around your oven. And if you essentially put like a brick wall in the middle of your oven, it's going to make the oven work that much harder to move heat around, and it probably won't do it very effectively. So putting a bunch of stuff in your oven all at once, especially if you're using large flat items, is just going to cause you grief. This segues very well into asking, what roasting pan should you use for your turkey? Now, you can use pretty much anything, right? Like, I like it to use a roasting pan with high sides because I can put vegetables in the bottom. Some people like to use like just a flat baking sheet with a little rim around the edges. That's fine too. But either way, what you want to do is put a rack in there to keep the turkey off the bottom of the pan. And there's a few reasons for this. One, you want air to circulate freely around your turkey. That will allow it to cook way more evenly than if part of it is resting on the bottom of the pan. Like anything close to the bottom of the pan will still be protected by like the brick wall that the pan creates from the heat, but raising it up on a rack will increase the chances of it cooking more evenly. Also, if your turkey is like literally resting on the bottom of the pan, like it stands a chance of sticking and you're gonna lose that beautiful skin down there. Plus, anything resting on the bottom of the pan is going to get like kind of soggy, and it's going to soak up any juices that drip out, especially if it's sitting on vegetables. You've got like moisture moving from the vegetables to the turkey, and it's just no bueno. Like you generally want to put your turkey on a rack to make sure it's not only more evenly cooked, but to make sure the bottom doesn't get all weird in texture. So I get asked this question 100 times every year, and it's, how long do I roast my turkey for? Or how long do I till my turkey is done? Or like, how do I know when my turkey is done, right? And the reality is that I can't tell you how long it's gonna take to cook your turkey because there is no right answer, right? There are so many different factors that relate to how long it takes your turkey to cook. How big is your turkey? What was the temperature of your turkey when you put it in the oven? How big is your oven? How efficiently does your personal oven heat? How many other things did you cram in there with it, even though I told you not to put anything in the oven with a turkey, right? Like giving you an answer would be unfair because it would be wrong almost 100% of the time, I guarantee it. So there's only one way to figure out how long it takes to cook your turkey, and that is to use a thermometer. Now, one thing you need to know about thermometers is they, like a lot of turkeys come with that little pop out thermometer, like the little plastic one that comes with the turkey. Don't use it, pull it out, throw it away. Those things are super inaccurate. Like I've had them go off with the turkey at 130 degrees and I've had them go off with the turkey 180 degrees. And both of those are problematic temperatures when it comes to turkey, right? So get rid of that little guy, get rid of it. Now go to Target, go to Amazon, go to Walmart, go to wherever, and get yourself a meat thermometer, ideally a rapid read digital meat thermometer. They can read a temperature in as quickly as like 5 to 15 seconds. What you do is you insert the thermometer in the turkey and it will tell you exactly what the temperature is. If it's not done, you put it back in the oven. But there's actually a temperature gauge that I would love you all to get because I feel like every single person, every single home cook needs to have one of these. And it's a digital probe thermometer with an alarm attached to it. And it is like, seriously, a game changer. The way it works is you insert the probe into the turkey and then there's a little wire that comes out of the oven and it attaches to a little alarm unit that sits off to the side outside of the oven, and you tell it when to beep and then it beeps when you're done. And it is amazing. You can use this thing for roasts. You can use it for chickens. You can use it for pretty much any meat related item that you're probably going to get distracted and forget about. And it is amazing because you don't have to keep opening your oven and testing your turkey, which causes the cooking time to increase. You also don't run the risk of getting distracted because you're cooking other foods. You're trying to entertain people in your house. And then, you get distracted and suddenly your turkey is like burnt, right? Or super dried out, and that's no good. Now, you can get one of these like little digital probe thermometers with an alarm for super cheap, right? You can get them from I think Taylor makes one for as little as like $15 on Amazon. If you want a really good one, you can buy one from ThermoWorks. It's like $70. It's amazing. But you don't need to get one that's that expensive. Like you can get the cheaper one from Taylor, 15 to 20 bucks. And seriously, it's a game changer. I highly recommend you check it out. Now, one thing you need to know about placing the thermometer in your turkey is you need to make sure that you place the thermometer in the right place or you will not get an accurate reading, which means your turkey may be undercooked when you take it out or overcooked. So what you want to do is you want to take the thermometer probe and you want to insert it in the thickest part of the turkey. And what you want is for the very tip of that probe to be dead center in the middle of the cut of meat you're putting it in, right? So that means the middle of all points, top, bottom, left, right, front, back. You also want to keep it away from any bones, which will throw off the temperature reading substantially. You might be surprised how much like measuring the temperature near a bone can throw off your temperature reading. But the goal is to measure the thickest, deepest part of the turkey because that is the point it's going to take the heat the longest to penetrate to. And that is the temperature that you're most concerned about. Now, what do you want the internal temperature of your turkey to be? Well, I'm glad you asked. So a safe internal cooking temperature for turkey is 160 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the temperature at which bacteria are killed and the FDA says it is safe to eat. But here's the problem. If you cook that turkey to 155 or 160 degrees Fahrenheit, you're going to take it out of the oven and that turkey is going to continue to carry over cook, right? It means the temperature is going to go from 160 to 165, 170, 175, potentially all the way up to 190 to 200 degrees. And by then, your turkey is shoe leather. I almost guarantee you, if you have screwed up turkeys and like ended up with like dried out horrible turkey meat, this is probably why. Most people cook their turkeys to the federally regulated guidelines, which is 160 degrees, but then that turkey continues to cook for another 20 to 40 degrees, depending on the temperature or the size of the turkey, right? And by the time it's done carryover cooking, it's way, way, way overcooked. Now, there's a whole scientific reason behind this, but the short story is that when you take your turkey out of the oven, it's still full of heat energy, right? That heat energy does not stop moving around the turkey as soon as you remove it from the heat. The heat that is like penetrated the turkey is still in there, and it's going to continue to penetrate the inside of the turkey. It's going to go deeper and deeper into the turkey and raise the internal temperature. So generally, if you want your turkey to be 160 degrees when it's done, you need to take it out of the oven at 145 degrees or 150 degrees. Taking it much above 150 degrees is kind of a recipe for disaster. So you take it out, you set it aside, you cover it with foil, you let it sit for 20 to 30 minutes. If it's a smaller turkey, 8 to 10 pounds, like 20 minutes should be fine. If it's a big gargantuan turkey, you want that turkey to rest for up to an hour. Actually, if it's a big gargantuan turkey, you probably want to take it out at 140 degrees because it's still got that whole body's worth of heat that's got to penetrate the middle. Like bigger turkeys can be a little bit of a struggle to cook perfectly just because they're huge, right? They're monumental, like they're gargantuan, they're monster turkeys, right? And it's really hard to heat that huge, massive meat evenly. But generally what you want to do is take out your turkey at 145 degrees Fahrenheit, let it rest, and it will come to safe temperature. And in fact, if you have a probe thermometer or one of those little alarm thermometers that I was talking about, you can leave it inserted in the meat and you can actually watch the temperature rise, which is fascinating. It's actually a really good exercise in heat convection and heat current. So you can see exactly what the energy in that turkey is doing, right? You take the turkey out, it's 145 degrees, you leave that thermometer as it's sitting there and you watch it and it goes from 145 to 150 to 155 to 160, even to 160 and 170, depending on how big the turkey was. So it's important to make sure that you don't overcook your turkey when it comes to carryover cooking, and you can do that by taking it out at 145 degrees. Now this goes for individual pieces of turkey as well, right? So if you've got your whole turkey in there and the breast comes to 145 degrees, but the thighs and the dark meat are still at 130 degrees, you don't take the whole turkey out just because the breast is at 135 degrees. You have to cut the breast off, set it aside, cover it with foil, let it come to temperature, and then you put the dark meat back in the oven until the dark meat comes to 145 or 150 degrees, and then you take it out and you do the same thing. It's just the safest way to cook a turkey while also making sure that it doesn't overcook and become very dry. Now it's important to mention, because I said all of this can be used for chicken as well, you do not want to take your chicken out at 145 degrees because the chicken is much smaller. It has way less meat mass. Therefore, it's not going to carry over cook as much. So if you're using these directions to cook a chicken, I suggest taking the chicken out at about 152 to 155 degrees. And again, be sure that you're rotating your turkey every 45 minutes to an hour, every 45 minutes for a smaller turkey, once an hour for a larger turkey. It just guarantees that your turkey is going to cook more evenly between the hot and cold spots in your oven. So I've just blathered on for God knows how long about turkey. Somewhere on this page is a link to download the document that I mentioned earlier. Find the link. Download that document. It's really important. It goes over everything that I detailed today and gives you charts. It tells you exactly when to take your turkey out of the freezer. It tells you exactly when to start brining your temperature. It gives you a recipe for a dry brine mixture that will tell you exactly how much you need to use based on the size of your turkey. Find that document, download it, print it out, keep it handy. It will save your butt, I promise. You can also just check out the blog post, which is either linked from this page or is this page, because I've probably embedded this video somewhere in the middle of it. The blog post is located on fearlessfresh.com, which is the place to go if you want to become a faster, more creative, more efficient home cook. So I want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving, or if it's not Thanksgiving, just a happy turkey day, whatever day of the year it is. And good luck with your turkey. If you have any turkey questions, go ahead and drop them below here and I will get them answered. Good luck.